The mansion gleamed under the soft glow of the moon, its towering windows reflecting the bright lights of the exclusive party within. Inside, laughter and music echoed through the vast halls, mingling with the sound of clinking glasses and the rustle of expensive clothing. The scent of fine wine and the allure of luxury filled the air. Jonathan Marks, a millionaire known for his business acumen, was finally arriving, though tonight, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, thick enough to be felt by anyone who dared to pay attention. The black limo that pulled up to the grand entrance of the mansion was sleek, modern, and practically a symbol of wealth in itself. As it came to a smooth stop, all eyes turned towards it. Jonathan Marks stepped out first, his tailored suit glistening under the lights. His jaw was sharp, and his eyes cold, a mask of perfection. But there was something else about him tonight, something different, something that made his confident stride feel more like a desperate attempt to keep control. Beside him was Evelyn. Her presence was almost jarring, out of place. She was stunning, no doubt, but there was an air of mystery about her that seemed to unsettle the guests who had gathered at the mansion. Her deep red dress flowed effortlessly around her legs, a stark contrast to the cold, calculated way she carried herself. She didn't smile, didn't engage in any form of pleasantries with the crowd. She was just there. But no one said anything. After all, Jonathan Marks was a man who had built an empire from the ground up. A man who had earned his place among the wealthiest elites. His word was law, and his charm could smooth over any awkwardness. But tonight, something was different. Guests whispered amongst themselves as Jonathan led Evelyn through the doors of the mansion. They all noticed the absence of his wife, Catherine. No one dared to ask about her, not out loud, at least. But in the corner of the room, a few familiar faces exchanged glances, wondering the same thing: where was Catherine? Jonathan's closest friends knew that the couple had always been inseparable. They had been the perfect pair, at least, that's what everyone had thought. Catherine, with her quiet grace, and Jonathan, with his sharp intelligence, made for the ideal couple. But now, she was nowhere to be seen. As Jonathan mingled with the other guests, his usual charm was in full swing. He exchanged pleasantries with old friends, laughed at jokes he didn't find funny, and smiled a little too brightly when people complimented him. Yet, despite his best efforts, the absence of his wife hung like a shadow over him. The guests couldn't ignore it, and neither could Jonathan. A few hours into the evening, Jonathan found himself near the bar, sipping on his scotch, trying to push the thought of Catherine out of his mind. He had already been asked 3 times that night where she was. The questions were starting to grate on him. But there was nothing he could do. He had to keep up appearances. He couldn't let them see him sweat. That's when Eleanor, one of his oldest friends, approached him. She was a sharp-witted woman with a knack for asking questions that people didn't always want to answer. Jonathan had always liked her. She was the type to speak her mind, no matter the consequences. "Jonathan," Eleanor said with a warm but knowing smile, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Where's Catherine? I haven't seen her in ages." The moment those words left her lips, the atmosphere around them seemed to freeze. Jonathan's hand tightened around his glass, and for a fleeting second, the mask slipped. His smile faltered, his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. But only for a moment. "She's not feeling well tonight," Jonathan said, his voice smooth and controlled, almost too controlled. "She's resting at home." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her gaze drifting to Evelyn, who was standing in the corner of the room, her arms crossed, watching the crowd with an unreadable expression. She hadn't said a word since they'd arrived. "Resting at home?" Eleanor repeated, her voice tinged with skepticism. "Is that so?" "It's just. I haven't seen her in weeks. And I thought you two were inseparable." "What's really going on, Jonathan?" The question hung in the air like a threat. Jonathan's jaw tightened, but he kept his cool. He had learned long ago that the best way to handle questions like these was to dismiss them with a wave of the hand, a practiced smile, and a story that people would buy without question. "It's nothing serious," he replied, his tone flat and rehearsed. "Catherine's just been feeling a little off lately. We're taking some time apart, that's all." Eleanor didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press him further. Instead, she gave him a nod and turned to leave, but not before casting one last curious glance at Evelyn. Jonathan felt a cold knot twist in his stomach. He couldn't let anyone get too close to the truth, not tonight. Not while everything was so fragile. The cracks were starting to show, but he couldn't let them widen. Not yet. As the night wore on, the tension in the mansion continued to build. The guests were trying to enjoy themselves, but there was a palpable unease in the air. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go horribly wrong. Evelyn, still quiet, still distant, moved through the crowd like a shadow. Her presence unsettled him more than he cared to admit. She wasn't part of his world, at least, not the world he had built. She was an outsider. An enigma. And the more he tried to ignore her, the more she seemed to loom over him. He was about to grab another drink when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He fished it out, glancing at the screen. The name on the display made his blood run cold. Unknown number. Jonathan's thumb hovered over the screen, unsure if he should answer. But curiosity got the best of him, and he swiped the screen to open the message. "You won't get away with this. She's not gone. She's never gone." The word sent a jolt of panic through him. His heart raced as he stared at the text, trying to make sense of it. Who could possibly know about Catherine? Who was sending him these cryptic messages? And how did they know? His mind spun with 1,000 questions, each one more troubling than the last. He looked over at Evelyn, who was now standing by the grand staircase, her phone in her hand, her expression unreadable. Had she received a message too? Was this all part of some twisted game? He couldn't be sure, but the tension was unbearable. He stuffed the phone back into his pocket, trying to calm his breathing. He had to stay in control. He had to keep it together. But then, just as he turned to make his way back into the crowd, a voice stopped him in his tracks. "Jonathan." It was Eleanor again, her voice barely above a whisper. She was standing near the edge of the room, her eyes locked onto him. But there was something different in her gaze now, something almost fearful. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't want to say anything in front of the others, but Catherine's not at home." Jonathan's chest tightened as his mind raced. What did she mean? What was she talking about? "Catherine's been missing for days, Jonathan. We've all been trying to reach her. Her friends, her family, she's not answering anyone." Jonathan felt a cold sweat break out along the back of his neck. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not here. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his words catching in his throat. Eleanor took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Someone's going to find out what really happened. And when they do, you won't be able to hide behind your wealth anymore." Jonathan's vision blurred as panic surged through him. The walls he had spent so many years building around himself were crumbling. The truth was starting to slip through the cracks, and there was no way to stop it. As Eleanor turned and walked away, Jonathan felt his knees weaken. He couldn't breathe. His heart pounded in his chest. Something was terribly wrong. And the worst part? He didn't know if he could stop it. Jonathan's mind was a storm of thoughts as he stumbled away from Eleanor. The words she had spoken reverberated through his skull, refusing to quiet down. "Catherine's been missing for days." The phrase was like a hammer striking his chest, the force of it knocking the breath from his lungs. His hands shook as he clutched the drink in his glass, now nearly empty. He didn't want to look weak, not in front of the guests, not in front of Evelyn. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He was starting to feel like he was unraveling, his well-crafted life spinning out of control faster than he could grasp. There had been whispers in the room. Subtle glances, murmurs, but now, everything was on the verge of exposure. The mansion seemed suffocating, as though the walls were closing in on him. The luxurious decor, the laughter of the guests, the clinking of glasses, it all felt distant, like a world that no longer belonged to him. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt small. His pulse raced as his mind raced with questions. Where was Catherine? Why had she disappeared? He couldn't make sense of it, and it terrified him. His empire, built on meticulous planning and control, was threatened by a force that he could not understand or combat. Was it Evelyn? Could she be involved in whatever was happening to Catherine? Or was someone else pulling the strings? Someone who knew too much? He glanced over at Evelyn, still standing by the staircase, her eyes fixed on him. She hadn't moved much since they'd arrived, remaining detached, almost aloof. She was a mystery, one Jonathan didn't know how to solve. The more he looked at her, the more her presence unsettled him. She was too quiet, too calm, yet there was something about her that spoke volumes, something he couldn't put his finger on. She wasn't like the other women Jonathan was used to, polished, predictable, and eager to impress. No, Evelyn was different. She had an air of defiance about her, a sense of purpose that Jonathan couldn't decipher. It made her alluring and dangerous, all at once. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts, cutting through the fog of panic in his mind. "Jonathan, we need to talk." It was Evelyn's voice, soft but firm. It was the first time she had spoken to him since they arrived. He turned to face her, his chest tight. "Talk about what?" His voice sounded strained, even to his own ears. Evelyn didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She held his gaze, her eyes dark and intense. She seemed to be weighing something, deciding how much to reveal. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever she had to say, he wasn't sure he was ready to hear it. "You know what's happening, don't you?" she asked quietly. Her tone wasn't accusing, but it wasn't gentle either. Jonathan's throat went dry. "I don't know what you mean," he said quickly, a little too quickly. He tried to sound convincing, but the lie felt hollow, and Evelyn saw right through it. Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You don't have to pretend with me, Jonathan," she said softly. "I know what you've been hiding. We both do." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. His chest tightened as if he couldn't breathe. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn's smile faded, her expression turning more serious. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Catherine's not just missing, Jonathan. She's been taken. And you know who did it." Jonathan's world tilted, his mind scrambling to grasp the gravity of her words. His eyes flickered toward the entrance, as if hoping someone would appear to stop this conversation, to make it all disappear. But no one was coming. The mansion, the party, the facade, it all felt like a cruel joke now. "Taken," he repeated, trying to steady his shaking hands. "Who would take her? Why?" Evelyn looked around, her eyes scanning the room for anyone who might be listening. She took a step closer, lowering her voice even further. "It's not what you think. It's not some random kidnapping. This is personal. Whoever did this knows you, Jonathan. They know your past. They're coming for you." Jonathan's stomach dropped. "My past? What the hell are you talking about?" Evelyn hesitated, as if weighing whether to continue. Finally, she sighed, stepping back slightly. "There's more to your story than anyone knows. You built your empire on lies, Jonathan. You buried the truth, and now it's coming back to haunt you." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was saying. Lies? What lies? He had worked his entire life to build the perfect image, wealth, success, a picture-perfect marriage to Catherine. His past was behind him, buried deep in the past where it couldn't hurt him. But Evelyn's eyes, those piercing eyes, told him something different. She knew something. She had to. "You're wrong," Jonathan said, his voice barely a whisper. He took a step back, his mind swirling with panic and confusion. "There's no truth to what you're saying." Evelyn's gaze softened, but her expression was still filled with resolve. "I know you don't want to believe it. But trust me, Jonathan. The truth is already here. And it's only a matter of time before it all comes crashing down." Jonathan felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. His chest tightened, his breath shallow. This couldn't be happening. Not now. He had worked too hard to lose everything, to let the past destroy him. But it was happening, right in front of him. And he had no idea how to stop it. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. Evelyn's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Because I'm not your enemy, Jonathan. I'm here to help you. But you have to be honest with yourself. You have to face the truth." Jonathan looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know if he could trust her. But one thing was certain, everything was falling apart, and Evelyn was the only one who seemed to know the pieces of the puzzle. Before he could respond, the door to the mansion opened with a creak, and another guest stepped inside. A man, tall and well-dressed, his face hidden in shadow. He paused when he saw Jonathan and Evelyn standing there, the tension between them palpable. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. The man didn't look familiar, but there was something about him that made Jonathan uneasy. The newcomer's gaze flickered toward Evelyn, then to Jonathan, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're Jonathan Marks, aren't you?" the man asked, his voice smooth but edged with an unmistakable authority. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. "Yes," he said cautiously. "Who are you?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Someone who knows more than you think." His gaze lingered on Jonathan, then flicked to Evelyn. "And I think we need to talk. All of us." Evelyn's expression hardened, and Jonathan's stomach twisted. Something was happening that he didn't understand. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. Jonathan could feel the walls closing in. The perfect life he had built was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. And then, just as the man took a step forward, Jonathan's phone buzzed in his pocket once again. He pulled it out, praying for something to hold on to, anything that would make sense of the madness unfolding around him. The screen read, "She's not gone, Jonathan. And neither are you." His blood ran cold. The storm had only just begun. Jonathan stood frozen in place as the man, tall, sharply dressed, and unfamiliar, stepped further into the mansion. Every instinct told him to turn and run, to escape the oppressive weight of the situation, but his legs felt like they were made of stone. The words that had just flashed across his phone still echoed in his mind, "She's not gone, Jonathan. And neither are you." The stranger's presence seemed to distort the atmosphere around them. The once luxurious party, filled with laughter and light, now felt eerily quiet, as if the room had suddenly gone still, waiting for something monumental to happen. The guests were unaware, absorbed in their own worlds, but Jonathan felt it, the shift. Something had changed. The man's smile wasn't warm. It wasn't even friendly. It was a knowing smile, one that suggested he knew far more about Jonathan than Jonathan cared to admit. The newcomer's eyes flicked between Jonathan and Evelyn, and that unnerving gaze lingered longer than necessary. "You must be Jonathan Marks," the man said, his voice deep and confident, with an undertone that demanded attention. Jonathan's hand instinctively clenched around the empty glass he still held, his knuckles going white. He didn't respond immediately, the weight of his thoughts pushing him into a frozen silence. Who was this man? Why did he seem so familiar, and yet, utterly foreign. A sense of unease bloomed in Jonathan's chest, threatening to suffocate him. Evelyn, standing nearby, seemed equally unnerved. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, though her face remained composed. It was as if she knew something Jonathan didn't, something that was about to shatter the thin veil of control he had managed to maintain. The man stepped closer, finally breaking the silence. "You don't remember me, do you, Jonathan?" He didn't wait for an answer, instead continuing, "Perhaps that's for the best. The past is often best left forgotten, wouldn't you agree?" Jonathan's throat went dry. His past. That word, the one he had worked so hard to bury, had come back to haunt him. But what did this man know about it? What did Evelyn know? And how much danger was Catherine really in? The man's eyes flicked to the phone in Jonathan's hand, and Jonathan, feeling a sudden surge of paranoia, instinctively stuffed it back into his pocket. But the damage was already done. The message had been read. The man had seen it. The smile on his face widened ever so slightly. "You're hiding something, Jonathan," the man continued, his voice low and steady. "And I've come to collect what's mine." At those words, Jonathan's heart stuttered. The room seemed to spin as his pulse quickened. What was happening? Was this some kind of threat? Who was this man, and what did he mean by collecting what's mine? Evelyn stepped forward, her face still composed but her voice tinged with tension. "You shouldn't be here. Not now." The man tilted his head slightly, considering her words. "Oh, I think it's the perfect time. Wouldn't you agree, Jonathan? The secrets you've kept locked away are finally surfacing. And they don't want to stay hidden anymore." Jonathan's blood ran cold. There it was again. The mention of secrets. His entire life, carefully constructed to avoid suspicion, to keep the skeletons buried deep in the past, was now coming undone before him. The walls were closing in faster than he could brace himself. "Who are you?" Jonathan managed to choke out, his voice hoarse with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The man smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "You can call me Victor," he said, his tone almost mockingly casual. "And I'm here to ensure that the truth comes out. You see, Jonathan, things are never as they seem, are they? Not for you. Not for Catherine. Not for anyone who's ever been involved with you." Victor's words struck Jonathan like a slap in the face. The truth? What truth? His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. But every time he tried to grasp at an answer, it slipped through his fingers like sand. He had to do something. He had to regain control, or everything would fall apart. Evelyn's voice broke through his spiral of thoughts. "Victor, this isn't the place," she said, a hint of urgency now creeping into her tone. "We need to leave. Now." But Victor didn't seem concerned. He stood tall, unfazed by the panic building around him. "I think it's the perfect place. After all, the guests are already here. Let's see how long it takes for the truth to come out in front of an audience." Jonathan's chest tightened. "What do you want from me?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. He could feel his grip slipping on the reality he had worked so hard to build. "I want what's mine," Victor repeated, his eyes narrowing. "I want the full story, Jonathan. I want it all to come to light. The lies you've told, the people you've betrayed, it's time to face the consequences of your actions." Jonathan's mind spun as the words hit him like a freight train. The truth. The lies. The people he had betrayed. What was he talking about? What had happened in the past that was now rising from the depths of time to consume him? "I don't know what you're talking about," Jonathan said, his voice barely a whisper. His eyes flickered to Evelyn, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but she merely stood there, her gaze fixed on Victor. She wasn't offering comfort. She wasn't trying to deflect this madness. She was watching it unfold, as if she had known this moment would come all along. Victor's gaze darkened. You don't remember, do you? The deals you made. The promises you broke. The people you hurt. Jonathan's mind reeled. He had made deals, yes. That was part of the business, part of the climb to the top. But promises? Hurt people? Who were they? And why couldn't he remember? Everything felt fragmented, as if pieces of his life had been erased, left behind in the shadows of his memory. Victor stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. It's time to remember, Jonathan. Time to face what you've done. The guests in the room began to murmur, their curiosity piqued by the escalating tension. The party that had once felt like a glamorous escape now felt like the beginning of a nightmare. Jonathan took a deep breath, trying to steady his emotions. The last thing he needed was to appear weak in front of these people. He had worked too hard to maintain his image of success and control. But the walls were crumbling around him, and he had no idea how to stop it. I don't know you, Jonathan said through gritted teeth, trying to maintain his composure. You're nothing but a stranger. Victor's laugh was low, almost pitying. You still don't get it, do you? He said. The man you've become isn't who you really are. And the truth about Catherine? It's all tied to your past. You can run, but you can't hide forever. The words hit Jonathan with the force of a sledgehammer. His heart raced. Catherine. His wife. What was Victor talking about? How was she involved in all of this? You need to face the truth, Jonathan, Victor continued. And when you do, you'll understand everything. You'll understand why Catherine is missing. And why she may never come back. The room seemed to blur as Jonathan's mind reeled. His thoughts raced, bouncing from one possibility to the next. What had he done? What had he hidden? The truth was out there, and it was coming for him, faster than he could run. Evelyn stepped forward, her face now hard, no longer offering him any comfort. This isn't the time for games, Victor, she said, her voice cold and commanding. If you want the truth, it will come out in due time. But not here. Not like this. Victor's expression didn't change. He looked at Jonathan one last time, as if weighing him, considering him like a puzzle. I'll be seeing you soon, Jonathan. Don't make me wait too long. The truth has a way of catching up with us, whether we're ready or not. With that, he turned and walked out of the mansion, leaving Jonathan standing there, his heart racing in his chest. The silence in the room felt deafening, the weight of everything that had just been revealed settling heavily on him. Evelyn didn't say a word. She simply stood there, watching him as if waiting for him to make the next move. Jonathan felt like the walls were closing in on him. The truth, the one he had buried so deep, was finally surfacing, and he had no idea how to stop it. His empire was crumbling, and the past had finally come back to claim its due. Jonathan's hands shook as he stared at the empty doorway, his mind reeling from the cryptic words Victor had left him with. The mansion felt smaller now, the grand rooms once filled with opulence and luxury suddenly stifling. Every breath he took felt labored, as if the air itself had thickened, pressing against him, suffocating him. He didn't know how long he stood there, frozen, staring at the place where Victor had stood. But the sound of distant murmurs from the party downstairs finally dragged him back into the present. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all felt like a distant memory now, a world he no longer belonged to. His phone buzzed again in his pocket, and Jonathan instinctively reached for it, hoping for some sort of answer, some kind of clarity. But when he looked at the screen, his heart dropped. It was another message. You don't have much time, Jonathan. The truth will find its way to you. It always does. The words blurred in his vision, his mind racing as he tried to process what was happening. What truth? What was it that Victor was talking about? The past? The lies? The secrets? He had buried so much of his past, convinced that it was gone, that it was safely tucked away in the recesses of his mind. But now, those buried memories were clawing their way to the surface, and he couldn't stop them. Every word from Victor, every cryptic message, was pulling him deeper into a storm of fear and uncertainty. Jonathan shoved the phone back into his pocket and paced the room, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had to regain control. He had always been in control, hadn't he? His life, his empire, everything he had worked for, he had built it all from the ground up. But now, the very foundation of everything he had created was crumbling, and he couldn't even understand why. A knock at the door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Jonathan froze, then walked slowly toward the door, his feet heavy. He knew who it was before he even opened it. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something that spoke volumes. She had been silent ever since Victor had left, watching Jonathan with a knowing gaze, but now, she stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the room with the kind of resolve that Jonathan couldn't ignore. Victor left, Evelyn said, her voice calm but laced with an edge. But that doesn't mean he's done with you. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. He didn't want to talk about Victor. He didn't want to talk about the past. He didn't want to talk about anything that would bring him closer to the suffocating truth. I need answers, Jonathan muttered, his voice barely audible. I need to know what's going on. Why is this happening? What does he want? Evelyn didn't speak immediately. She simply stood there, her gaze steady, as though she were deciding whether to speak at all. Jonathan's impatience flared, and he stepped closer to her, his frustration mounting. You know something, don't you? He demanded. You know what he's talking about. About the past. About Catherine. You knew this was coming. Evelyn's eyes softened for a moment, and then her expression hardened. I've always known, Jonathan. But that doesn't mean I can fix it. I can't change what's already been done. Jonathan's head spun. What are you talking about? What's been done? What happened? You need to tell me everything, Evelyn. Evelyn took a deep breath, as though gathering herself before speaking. Then, slowly, she began. Victor, he's not just some random man, Jonathan, she said quietly, her voice measured. He's part of your past. A part you've been trying to forget. Jonathan felt a wave of nausea flood his stomach. He could hear the ominous tone in her words, the gravity of what she was saying sinking in. I don't understand, he said, his voice strained. Who is he? What does he have to do with me? Evelyn's eyes flickered briefly to the window, as though checking to see if anyone was listening. Then, she took a step closer to Jonathan, her voice dropping to a whisper. Victor was involved in some of the darker deals you made when you were starting out. Deals that, they weren't just business. They were personal. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she seemed to choose her words carefully, as though weighing the consequences of every syllable. I mean that the things you did to get to where you are weren't all legal, she said slowly. And they certainly weren't all ethical. You used people, Jonathan. People you knew would get hurt. People you knew would disappear. Jonathan recoiled, his stomach twisting. I didn't. No, you didn't kill anyone, she interrupted quickly, her voice firm. But you made deals with people who did. You turned a blind eye to things you knew were wrong. And now, those people are coming back. The words hit Jonathan like a physical blow, the force of them stunning him into silence. He staggered backward, his mind unable to process what Evelyn was saying. No, he whispered, his voice hollow. That can't be true. I built everything honestly. Everything I have, it's mine. I didn't. Evelyn shook her head, her face filled with regret. You didn't do everything on your own, Jonathan. And you certainly didn't build it all on honesty. Your empire was built on the backs of people you betrayed, people you left behind. And now, they want payment. Jonathan's knees went weak. The room seemed to spin as the weight of Evelyn's words crushed him. He could feel the floor beneath him buckling, his mind scrambling to find some sort of anchor, some way to explain what was happening. But there was nothing. There was a time when I was willing to turn a blind eye, Evelyn continued, her voice growing colder. I stayed by your side, knowing there were things I couldn't change. But now, it's too late. The truth has come for you. Jonathan's pulse hammered in his ears. His thoughts were a jumble of confusion and fear, each new revelation twisting everything he thought he knew about himself and his life. He had worked so hard to distance himself from his past, to bury the things he regretted. But now, everything was coming back. And it wasn't just the past, it was the present, the people he had wronged, the things he had done. Catherine, Jonathan whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer. She knows. Evelyn's gaze softened, but there was no pity in it. She knows more than you think, Jonathan. She's been trying to get away from you, trying to protect herself. And now, with Victor involved, she's in danger. You've dragged her into all of this, and you didn't even realize it. Jonathan felt his knees buckle. He reached out to steady himself against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The guilt hit him like a wave, a crushing weight that he could no longer escape. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. What do I do? How do I fix this? How do I get her back? Evelyn didn't offer an answer. Instead, she looked at him with a mixture of sadness and regret, her expression more distant than ever. You can't fix it, Jonathan. Not now. The damage is done. The finality in her voice sent a chill down Jonathan's spine. There was no escaping it. His past, the deals, the lies, everything had come back to claim him. And now, his only hope for redemption was buried deep within the very secrets he had tried so hard to forget. Jonathan sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of his own mistakes. There was no easy way out. The only path left was one of reckoning. As he sat there, consumed by guilt and fear, a noise from outside the room caught his attention. A faint sound, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't alone. Someone else was here. The door to the room creaked open. And when Jonathan looked up, his blood ran cold. Standing in the doorway was a figure he never thought he'd see again. The door creaked open slowly, and Jonathan's heart raced as he turned toward the sound. His mind was still reeling from the shocking truths Evelyn had just revealed. His life, his empire, his marriage, they had all been built on lies, on deception, on a dark and twisted past that he had tried so desperately to bury. But now, that past had caught up with him, and there was no escape. He was barely able to steady himself as he looked up at the figure in the doorway. His body seemed to freeze, his muscles locking up as though he were facing a ghost. Standing there was a man he hadn't seen in years. A man who had once been a part of his life, someone Jonathan had hoped he'd never have to confront again. Victor, Jonathan whispered, the word tasting like ash on his tongue. Victor stood tall in the doorway, his expression inscrutable, his eyes gleaming with something Jonathan couldn't quite place, triumph, maybe, or just cold indifference. His posture was calm, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. He had come back, and this time, there was no running from the inevitable confrontation. I knew you'd be here, Jonathan muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't think it would be like this. Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped into the room, his presence heavy, almost suffocating. He didn't close the door behind him, leaving it wide open as if to invite something, or someone, else into the situation. Jonathan's eyes darted briefly to Evelyn, but she had already turned away, her face unreadable. Victor walked in, the expensive fabric of his suit whispering against the floor with each step. He didn't seem fazed by the tension in the room, as though he had been expecting it. Jonathan's heart hammered in his chest, but there was no denying it, he was cornered now. There was nowhere to run. No more lies to hide behind. "I see you're as surprised to see me as I expected," Victor finally spoke, his voice smooth, like dark velvet. "But then again, you were always good at running, weren't you, Jonathan?" Jonathan clenched his fists, his mind swirling with 1,000 thoughts. He knew Victor wasn't here for a pleasant conversation. This was the reckoning, the moment when everything Jonathan had done, everything he had tried to escape, would finally come crashing down. "Why now?" Jonathan asked, his voice rough. "What do you want, Victor? Why come back after all these years?" Victor's eyes gleamed, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because you never learned, Jonathan. You never learned that actions have consequences. And now, those consequences are knocking at your door." Jonathan's pulse spiked. "What are you talking about?" Victor chuckled darkly, his gaze moving to Evelyn, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. "You really don't get it, do you? Your past is far from over. It's just beginning. The truth will always come to light, no matter how hard you try to bury it. And you, Jonathan, you've made sure that the people who want answers won't stop until they get them." Jonathan's blood ran cold. The words, "people who want answers," echoed in his mind like a warning bell. What did Victor mean by that? Was he talking about Catherine? Had she gotten involved in this mess somehow? And what did all of this have to do with Victor? He thought he had escaped this part of his life. "You think you can just show up after all these years and throw my life into chaos?" Jonathan spat, his frustration boiling over. "You don't know anything about me now. I'm not the same man I was." Victor took a deliberate step closer, and Jonathan felt the air in the room grow heavier. The tension was palpable, the silence between them thick with unspoken threats. Jonathan's mind raced, but he couldn't figure out what Victor wanted. What was the point of all this? "You're right about one thing, Jonathan," Victor said slowly, his voice low and filled with venom. "You're not the same man you were. You're worse. You've learned how to hide your mistakes, how to bury your guilt. But no matter how much you've changed, one thing remains the same: your past will always come for you." Jonathan gritted his teeth, a sense of dread flooding his veins. "What do you want, Victor?" Victor smiled, a smile so chilling that it sent a shiver down Jonathan's spine. "I want what's mine. I want what you took from me. What you promised me." Jonathan's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about? I didn't take anything from you. I don't owe you anything." Victor shook his head, his expression darkening. "You're lying to yourself, Jonathan. You always were. Don't you remember the promises you made to me? The deals we struck, the things you agreed to do in exchange for power? I gave you everything. And now, I'm here to collect." Jonathan's mind was spinning. His hands trembled as he tried to piece together the fragments of memory Victor was alluding to. Deals? Promises? He didn't remember any of it, not clearly. And yet, he knew, deep down, that Victor wasn't lying. There was something in the depths of his past, something he had buried so deep it had nearly faded from his memory. "Stop!" Jonathan shouted suddenly, his voice filled with a mix of anger and fear. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember any of this. It's over, Victor. It's done. Leave me and my family alone." Victor's eyes darkened, his expression growing more intense. "You think it's over? You think you can just walk away from the deals you made, from the people you betrayed? Jonathan, there's no walking away from this. The consequences have already begun." Jonathan's breath hitched as Victor's words sank in. "The people I betrayed," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Who are you talking about? What people?" Victor took a step back and glanced at Evelyn, who was standing near the window, her arms crossed, her face expressionless. Jonathan's gaze flicked to her as well, the weight of everything she had said earlier pressing down on him. Evelyn knew more than she was letting on. She had been involved in all of this. But how? Your wife, Victor said, his voice suddenly much quieter, as though savoring the moment. Catherine. She's not just a victim in all this, Jonathan. She's part of the reason why this is happening. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Victor took a deep breath, his gaze cold as ice. You didn't think she was innocent in all this, did you? Catherine's been keeping secrets of her own. She knew about the deals you made. She knew about the people you hurt. And now, she's paying the price for your mistakes. Jonathan's world tilted on its axis. He stumbled back, his mind racing to make sense of what Victor was saying. Catherine? No. That couldn't be possible. He had never thought that she was involved in the things he had done. She had always been the one thing he had tried to protect from the darkness of his past. But now, everything was falling apart. You're lying, Jonathan said desperately. She's innocent. She has nothing to do with this. Victor's smile was cruel. You don't know Catherine the way you think you do. And now, because of your choices, she's in more danger than you can possibly imagine. Jonathan felt a wave of panic sweep over him. His mind was spinning, struggling to hold on to some semblance of control. What have you done to her? He demanded. Victor's eyes glinted with amusement. I haven't done anything yet. But I will. And you'll watch. You'll watch as everything you've worked for burns to the ground. Jonathan's fists clenched, his anger rising like a storm inside him. No. I won't let you hurt her. I'll do whatever it takes to protect her. Victor shook his head, the amusement in his eyes turning into something colder. You're too late, Jonathan. The damage has already been done. You should have thought about the consequences before you made those deals. Now, you'll face them. Jonathan's mind whirled with panic. He had to find Catherine. He had to get to her before it was too late. But the question was, where was she? What had Victor done? What had she gotten herself into? I will fix this, Jonathan said, more to himself than to anyone else. I'll find her. I'll make this right. Victor laughed softly, the sound a low, mocking chuckle. You can't fix this, Jonathan. You never could. You'll never be able to fix what's been broken. Jonathan's mind raced, the clock ticking down with every second. The truth was finally here, the reckoning that had been waiting for him all these years. And now, he had to make a choice, face the consequences of his actions or lose everything, including the woman he loved. But what if it was already too late? Jonathan's pulse pounded in his ears as he stood frozen in place. The words Victor had just spoken echoed in his mind, each one a hammer blow to the fragile construct of the life he had worked so hard to build. His past, his mistakes, everything had come rushing back, and he was left standing on the precipice, the weight of his own decisions pulling him under. He had always thought he could control the narrative of his life. He had believed that no matter what he had done, no matter how dark or twisted the road had been, he could always rise above it. But now, standing face to face with the consequences of his past, Jonathan realized how naive he had been. Victor's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched Jonathan struggle to process the depth of the situation. The quiet room, filled with tension and fear, seemed to close in on Jonathan, his own thoughts drowning out everything else. Catherine. Evelyn. The lies. The deals. The darkness he had buried so deeply in his mind. I know you're thinking about running, Victor said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. But it's too late for that, Jonathan. The choices you've made have already set things in motion. And there's no going back. Jonathan wanted to scream, to lash out, but he knew that the person standing in front of him wasn't someone he could fight with anger alone. The last few days had proven that. The truth, no matter how painful, had always been lurking beneath the surface, and now it was impossible to ignore. "I won't let you hurt her," Jonathan finally found his voice, though it was weak and uncertain. He didn't know how he would stop Victor or what he was capable of, but the one thing he was certain of was that he couldn't let Catherine suffer. Not because of him. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Her? You're still thinking about her, even now? After everything you've done?" Jonathan's stomach twisted. He wanted to punch Victor, wanted to tear him apart for everything he had done, for every lie he had fed him over the years. But as much as he wanted to tear Victor apart, he knew that the real fight was not with Victor, it was with himself. With the life he had chosen, the people he had hurt, and the path that had led him to this exact moment. "Where is she?" Jonathan demanded, his voice hoarse. "What have you done with her?" Victor's smile faltered for a brief moment, but it quickly returned, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Catherine is exactly where she's supposed to be," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And she's already made her choice." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, made her choice? What are you talking about?" Victor stepped closer, the room feeling smaller with each step. "I'm not the only one with a past, Jonathan. You're not the only one with secrets. Catherine, she's been hiding things from you. From all of us. And now, she's made her decision. She's chosen to play the game her way. She always has." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Jonathan's mind reeled as he tried to make sense of what Victor was saying. Catherine? Hiding things? Playing the game? This wasn't possible. This wasn't the woman he had married, the woman who had always been the light in his dark world. "You're lying," Jonathan spat, his anger flaring. "She's not like you. She's not like any of this." Victor shook his head slowly, his expression one of quiet amusement. "Oh, Jonathan, you have no idea what she's capable of. But you will. Soon enough." Before Jonathan could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "You're wrong, Victor." Jonathan whipped around to see Evelyn standing by the window, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed firmly on Victor. There was something in her stance, something resolute and final, that made Jonathan's heart beat faster. What was happening? What did Evelyn know that he didn't? Victor turned slowly, his gaze shifting to Evelyn, the smile on his lips turning into something darker. "Evelyn," he said with mock warmth, "I didn't realize you were in the mood for one last round of playing the hero." Evelyn didn't flinch, her voice steady and calm. "I'm not playing hero, Victor. I'm telling Jonathan the truth. The whole truth." Jonathan's confusion only deepened. "Truth? What truth? What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice tight with panic. "What truth?" Evelyn took a deep breath and finally walked toward him, her steps deliberate. "You've been kept in the dark, Jonathan. About Catherine. About me. About everything. But now, you're going to learn what you should have known all along." Victor's eyes flicked between Evelyn and Jonathan, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "You're wasting your time, Evelyn. The boy is too far gone. He'll never understand." Evelyn ignored Victor and reached out to Jonathan, her hand resting gently on his arm. "Catherine isn't the person you think she is. She's not the person you married. She's been keeping secrets, just like you." Jonathan recoiled slightly, as if Evelyn's words were a slap across his face. "What? No. She couldn't." Evelyn's gaze softened, but there was no pity in it. "She knew everything, Jonathan. She knew about your deals, your past, the people you betrayed. She's not some innocent victim in all of this. She's been playing her own game from the start. You never saw it because you were too busy hiding your own." Jonathan's mind raced, his chest tightening as he tried to wrap his head around Evelyn's words. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Catherine had been the one thing in his life that he had believed in, the one person he had trusted without question. Why didn't you tell me this? Jonathan's voice cracked. Why didn't you warn me? Evelyn looked at him with a mixture of sadness and resolve. Because you needed to figure it out on your own. The truth was always there, Jonathan. You just refused to see it. Now, you have no choice. Victor, who had been watching the exchange with growing impatience, finally spoke up. This is a waste of time. She's made her decision, Jonathan. You've made yours. And now, everything you've built, everything you've tried to protect, is about to come crashing down. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. No. I won't let that happen. I'll find her. I'll fix this. Victor shook his head slowly. It's already done. You can't fix what's been broken. It's too late for that. A long silence stretched between them, and Jonathan's mind spun with everything he had just learned. Evelyn's revelations had shattered his world, and Victor's taunts had only deepened the wound. His past, his mistakes, they had all led to this. And now, there was nothing left to do but face the consequences. For a moment, Jonathan didn't know what to do. His heart ached, his mind a whirlwind of doubt and fear. But then, something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to let everything he loved fall apart. He wasn't going to let Victor win. I'll stop you, Jonathan said, his voice filled with determination. I'll make this right. I'll find Catherine, and I'll make her see what's really happening. Victor's eyes glittered with amusement. You're welcome to try, Jonathan. But I'm afraid you're already too late. Before Jonathan could respond, the room was filled with the sharp sound of a phone vibrating. It was Jonathan's phone, the one he had tossed aside earlier. He grabbed it from his pocket, his hands trembling as he saw the message. I'm sorry, Jonathan. It's too late. I had to do this. I had to protect us both. The words blurred in his vision as he read them over and over again, his heart sinking with each repetition. No, Jonathan whispered, the weight of the words crushing him. No, Catherine. No. Victor smiled coldly. It's over, Jonathan. You've lost. Jonathan looked at Evelyn, then at Victor, his mind flooded with 1,000 emotions. His past, his mistakes, and now Catherine, everything he had once thought he could protect was slipping away, lost to the darkness he had created. But as he stood there, amidst the wreckage of his life, one thought remained clear in his mind: he wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. He would fight for Catherine. He would fight for redemption. And, no matter the cost, he would find a way to make things right.